I never thought I'd feel like a stranger in my own family. My name is Evelyn Harper, and I'm 68 years old, living in a small town in Illinois. After raising my son, Michael, single-handedly following my husband's passing, I believed our bond was unbreakable. But when I accidentally overheard his holiday plans, I realized I was left out in a way I never could have imagined. Let me know where you're tuning in from, and hit like if you believe that the hardest goodbyes often happen without a word. I never imagined the day would come when I'd realize I was invisible to my own son. My name is Evelyn Harper, and I'm 68 years old, living quietly in a small town in Illinois. Widowed for nearly a decade, I've spent most of my life devoted to raising Michael, my only child. When my husband passed away, it was just the two of us against the world. I thought the bond we shared was unbreakable, especially during the holidays, when our little family traditions meant everything to me. This year, though, something changed. It was a chilly November evening when I found myself accidentally eavesdropping on a conversation between Michael and his wife, Lisa. They were in the kitchen, voices low but unmistakable. I had gone upstairs to grab a sweater when I heard their words slip through the cracked door. "We've got the whole weekend planned," Michael said, his tone bright. "The kids will be with Lisa's parents on Christmas Eve, then we're hosting a dinner on Christmas Day. Mom doesn't want to come anyway, and Lisa's made it clear she prefers to keep things small this year." Lisa's laugh was light, almost dismissive. "Yeah, I think it's better if she stays home. Last year was so stressful with her around, you remember." I stood frozen, clutching the sweater to my chest as the reality sank in. I wasn't invited. Not this time. Not at all. It wasn't just the exclusion that stung, it was the way they spoke of me, as if I were no longer part of their lives, a distant memory rather than the mother who'd sacrificed so much to raise them. I could feel the years of warmth and closeness slipping away, replaced by cold distance I hadn't anticipated. It brought back memories of holidays past, when Michael was young and the house was filled with laughter, the smell of cinnamon and pine, and the comforting presence of family. After my husband passed, those holidays became my anchor, the one time each year when I felt truly connected to Michael. He promised me then, with a boyish grin, that I'd always be part of the celebrations. "Mom, you're the heart of the holidays," he'd said, wrapping me in a hug that still warmed me years later. But that promise, once so certain, now felt fragile and broken. After overhearing that conversation, I went back to my quiet living room and sat down, my hands trembling. I thought about the decades I'd poured into Michael's life, the sleepless nights when he was sick, the school plays I never missed, the meals I cooked with care, and the sacrifices I made to keep our family whole after Dad passed. I never once thought any of it would matter less as time went on. I remembered the first Christmas without my husband, how Michael insisted we decorate the tree together, just the two of us, making new memories in the empty house. Those days seemed so far away now, like a story from another lifetime. I glanced around my small home, the walls adorned with photos of Michael growing up, his first steps, birthday parties, graduations. Each picture a silent reminder of the closeness we once shared. A lump rose in my throat as I realized how much I missed him, how much I longed to be included, not just for the holidays but in his life. The next morning, I found it hard to face the world. I wanted to reach out, to ask Michael why things had changed, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I busied myself with small chores, hoping the ache inside would ease with time. But it didn't. Over the next few days, I found myself replaying that overheard conversation again and again. Every mention of not wanting to come or keeping things small echoed in my mind like a cruel refrain. I tried to push it aside, telling myself maybe I had misunderstood, or that Michael and Lisa had other reasons I didn't know about. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't part of their plans anymore. The ache grew heavier as I remembered the year before, when Lisa had insisted on hosting Christmas dinner at their house. I had brought a dish, hoping to contribute, but was quickly told to leave it in the kitchen, out of the way. Lisa's smile was polite but distant, her eyes avoiding mine. Michael barely looked up from his phone. The room felt crowded but empty, and I left feeling more like an intruder than family. I thought about calling Michael, but the phone felt heavy in my hand. How do you ask someone why they no longer want you around? How do you confront a silence that screams louder than any argument? I found myself retreating into old photo albums, flipping through pages filled with happier times. One photo caught my eye, a candid shot of Michael as a boy, grinning with a face full of chocolate cake, his arms wrapped around me. Written on the back in my husband's handwriting was a note: "Family is everything. Never forget where you belong." That note was a bitter reminder that belonging is sometimes fragile, easily broken by time and circumstance. I wanted to believe Michael still cared, that this was just a phase, a misunderstanding that could be healed with time and conversation. But fear whispered that maybe the years of sacrifice and love meant less to him now, replaced by a new life with Lisa and their children. I began to notice the subtle ways my presence was sidelined. Invitations to family events came late or not at all. Phone calls grew infrequent, often ending abruptly. Lisa's polite smiles never quite reached her eyes when I visited. Michael's attention was elsewhere, his laughter reserved for his own family. The realization was painful, but it also stirred something inside me, a quiet resolve not to disappear into the margins of their lives without a fight. I didn't want to be a shadow, forgotten and alone. I wanted to reclaim the place I'd held in Michael's heart, or at least understand why it was slipping away. One afternoon, I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and a pen. I began writing a letter to Michael, words pouring out of me, the memories, the hopes, the hurt. I told him how much I missed being part of his life, how I longed for the closeness we once shared. I didn't know if I'd send it, but writing helped me face the truth I'd been avoiding. That night, I lay awake thinking about the holidays ahead. The house would be quiet, the tree undecorated, the warmth of family absent. But maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new chapter, not the one I had imagined, but one where I could find my own way to belong again. I didn't have all the answers, and I wasn't sure how to bridge the growing distance between us. But I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't ready to be forgotten. So I sat by the window, watching the snow begin to fall softly outside, and held on to the hope that love, though sometimes tested, could still find its way home. In the weeks that followed, the distance between Michael and me felt like a widening chasm I couldn't bridge. The small Illinois town I'd lived in for decades suddenly seemed colder, emptier, as if the very streets whispered reminders of my growing isolation. I had always believed that love, especially between a mother and her son, could withstand time and change. But now, I wondered if it was simply an illusion. The first signs of the growing divide had been subtle, almost imperceptible at first. Invitations to family dinners became less frequent, and when they came, I was often the last to know. Lisa's presence seemed to grow larger in Michael's life, and with her, a new set of priorities and social circles that didn't include me. It wasn't just the holidays anymore, it was every day. I remember one afternoon not long after that painful overheard conversation, when I went to Michael and Lisa's house, hoping to spend some time with my grandchildren. The door opened before I could knock, and Lisa greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom," she said, almost too brightly, "we're just about to head out to a friend's party. Maybe another time?" I nodded, trying to hide the ache in my chest. "Of course. I just wanted to see the kids." "They're at the park," Lisa said quickly, then added, "You know how busy we are this time of year." I forced a smile and left, the sound of the door closing behind me feeling heavier than any words. It was a small moment, but it was one of many that chipped away at the foundation of our relationship. Lisa's subtle dismissals became a pattern. At family gatherings, she would steer conversations away from me, rarely including me in plans or discussions. I overheard her once telling a friend that I was set in my ways, and that Michael needed space to build his own life. Those words stung, cutting deeper than any argument could. Michael, too, seemed distracted and distant. Our phone calls were brief and often ended abruptly, with excuses about work or commitments. The warmth that once filled his voice was replaced by a polite but distant tone. I found myself clutching the phone after each call, mourning the connection that seemed to slip further out of reach. One evening, as I sat alone by the fireplace, I found an old holiday card tucked away in a drawer. It was from Michael, sent years ago, filled with his youthful handwriting and warm words. "Mom, you make the holidays magical. Thank you for everything you do. Love, Michael." The card was yellowed with age, but the sentiment was as fresh as ever. Holding that card, I felt a deep ache, a reminder of what once was and what might never be again. The contrast between those heartfelt words and the silence I now faced was almost unbearable. Desperate for support, I reached out to Ruth, a close family friend who had known me since Michael was a boy. Ruth had always been a steady presence in my life, someone I trusted to listen without judgment. When I called her, my voice trembled as I shared the pain of feeling pushed aside, the loneliness that had settled in my heart. Ruth didn't offer empty reassurances. Instead, she listened patiently, her voice soft but firm. "Evelyn, sometimes people change, and it's painful. But you're not alone, and you deserve to be heard and loved. Maybe it's time to find new ways to connect, with Michael, but also with yourself." Her words resonated deeply. I realized I had been so focused on the past, on what I'd lost, that I hadn't considered what I might still gain by reaching out and redefining our relationship. With Ruth's encouragement, I began to muster the courage to face the growing distance head-on. I wrote a letter to Michael, not just about the holidays, but about the years of love, sacrifice, and hope I carried with me. I told him how much I missed him, how I longed to understand what had changed, and how I still wanted to be part of his life. Sending that letter was terrifying. I didn't know if he would respond or if my words would fall on deaf ears. But I needed him to know how deeply I felt, even if the outcome was uncertain. Days passed without a reply, and doubt crept in like a shadow. I wondered if I'd made a mistake, if I was holding on to something that no longer existed. But Ruth reminded me to be patient, to give Michael space while keeping my heart open. One afternoon, I received a phone call from Michael. His voice was tentative, unfamiliar in its vulnerability. "Mom," he began, "I got your letter. I'm sorry I haven't been the son you needed lately. Things have been complicated with Lisa and the kids, and I didn't know how to say it." We talked then, awkwardly at first, but honestly. I told him about the loneliness, the hurt of feeling excluded. He shared his struggles balancing his new family and the expectations that came with it. It wasn't the perfect conversation, but it was a start. Michael's admission didn't erase the pain, but it opened a door. It reminded me that beneath the distance, there was still a connection waiting to be nurtured. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the years we'd shared and the changes that life inevitably brings. I understood that Michael and Lisa's focus on their immediate family was natural, even if it left me on the sidelines. But I also realized that I didn't have to wait passively for inclusion. I could seek new ways to be part of their lives and create my own circle of support. I began to look beyond my own home, attending community events and reconnecting with neighbors I hadn't seen in years. I discovered a local senior center where others shared stories of loneliness and exclusion. Their experiences mirrored mine, and together we found comfort in shared understanding. Slowly, I started to rebuild my sense of belonging, not just as Michael's mother, but as Evelyn Harper, a woman capable of forging new connections and finding joy beyond old expectations. Though the holidays still loomed ahead with uncertainty, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this growing distance was not an end, but an invitation to redefine family, to embrace change with grace, and to find strength in unexpected places. And as Michael and I continued to navigate our complicated relationship, I held on to the belief that love, even when stretched thin, could still find ways to heal and endure. After that tentative phone call with Michael, I knew I had to take more deliberate steps to bridge the gap growing between us. The silence and distance that had settled were too heavy to ignore, and I realized that waiting for reconciliation to happen on its own was a luxury I no longer had. I needed to find my voice again, to speak my truth clearly and to reach out in ways that might awaken the connection we once shared. I began by writing letters. Not just one, but several, each filled with my feelings, memories, and hopes. Some were raw and vulnerable, others more hopeful, but all were honest. I poured into those pages the years of love, sacrifice, and longing that had defined my relationship with Michael. Writing helped me process the ache inside, but more importantly, it gave me a way to communicate when face-to-face conversations felt too daunting. I sent the letters sporadically, never sure if Michael would read them or respond. Sometimes the silence that followed was deafening, and I wrestled with the fear that I was being rejected, that my efforts were in vain. But I reminded myself that speaking up was a necessary step, even if it didn't bring immediate answers. Then came a phone call that would change everything, a family call arranged by Michael, Lisa included, and our grandchildren chattering in the background. My heart pounded with a mixture of hope and anxiety as I answered. The conversation began awkwardly, the silence between words thick and uncomfortable. I took a deep breath and decided to be honest. "Michael, Lisa," I began, my voice steady but tender, "I've been feeling very left out lately. It hurts to be excluded from family gatherings and the holidays. I miss being part of your lives." There was a pause on the other end. Michael cleared his throat and said, "Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. Life has been complicated, but you're important to us." Lisa's voice was quieter, more restrained. "We just got caught up in our own world. We didn't realize how much you felt left out." That conversation was far from perfect. Emotions bubbled under the surface, and at times, voices rose in frustration. But beneath the tension, there was honesty, a willingness to acknowledge the pain and begin the difficult work of healing. After the call, I felt both exhausted and relieved. Speaking my truth had been scary, but it had opened a door that had been closed for too long. I realized that rebuilding our relationship wouldn't be quick or easy, but it was possible if we kept trying. Around that time, Ruth shared my story with a local support group for seniors who felt isolated or forgotten. To my surprise, my experience resonated with many others. Women and men who had faced similar struggles began reaching out, sharing their own stories of exclusion and loneliness. It was a quiet ripple that started to spread beyond my small circle, reminding me that I was not alone in this. The support group became a source of strength. Hearing others speak so openly about their pain and resilience inspired me to keep fighting for connection, not just with Michael, but with the broader community. I began attending meetings regularly, finding comfort in the shared understanding and encouragement. One afternoon, after a particularly moving session, a woman named Joan approached me. "Evelyn," she said, "your story gave me courage to speak up to my own family. Thank you for sharing." Her words touched me deeply. I realized that by finding my voice, I was not only healing myself but helping others to do the same. It was a powerful revelation that our stories could weave together to create a tapestry of strength and hope. With renewed purpose, I continued reaching out to Michael, sending shorter notes and making gentle phone calls. Slowly, our conversations became more frequent and less strained. We talked about the grandchildren, shared memories, and even made tentative plans to visit. Through it all, I learned to balance hope with realism. I understood that relationships evolve, sometimes in painful ways, but that they can also grow richer with effort and honesty. The key was to keep speaking, to keep listening, and to never give up on the possibility of connection. As the holidays approached once more, I felt a cautious optimism. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer silent or alone. I had reclaimed my voice and found a community that embraced me. And even if Michael and I still had much to work through, I was ready to face it with an open heart. After months of quiet reflection and tentative reconnections, I found myself yearning to create something new, something that could fill the emptiness that had settled into my heart and home. The holidays were approaching, a time that once brought joy but now carried a heavy weight of absence. I realized that if I wanted warmth and connection, I might have to build it myself, not just wait for Michael or anyone else to make room for me. It started simply. I dusted off the old china and polished the silverware I'd kept since my husband's passing. I baked cookies, not for anyone in particular, but as a gesture of hope and hospitality. Then, I sent out invitations, not to family, but to neighbors, friends, and acquaintances I'd met at the senior center and the support group Ruth had introduced me to. Many of them, like me, had stories of loneliness, exclusion, or fractured family ties. I wanted to offer them a place to belong, even if just for an afternoon. The first gathering was modest, a few dozen people filling my small living room with laughter and conversation. I set up a table laden with food, homemade pies, savory casseroles, and trays of finger sandwiches. The air was fragrant with cinnamon and pine, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of the holiday magic I'd missed. As the weeks passed, those gatherings grew. Word spread that my home was a refuge for those who felt forgotten or sidelined. People came with stories to share, tears to shed, and smiles to exchange. We began to weave a new kind of family, one not defined by blood but by shared experience and compassion. We called our gatherings the Hearth, a name that felt right for a place where warmth was rekindled and connections forged. Each event included storytelling circles, where attendees took turns sharing memories, hopes, and lessons learned. Those stories stitched us together, creating a tapestry of resilience and understanding. Craft workshops became a regular feature, too. I taught simple holiday crafts, ornaments made from recycled materials, wreaths woven from evergreens gathered in nearby woods. These activities brought joy and a sense of accomplishment, turning our gatherings into celebrations of creativity and renewal. Food, as always, was central. We shared recipes passed down through generations, blending traditions into new flavors. One evening, a woman named Margaret brought her family's cherished stuffing recipe, while another guest contributed a vegan stew that quickly became a favorite. These meals nourished not only our bodies but our spirits, reminding us that sharing sustenance is a profound act of love. The community that blossomed around the hearth surprised me. People began to look forward to these gatherings, marking their calendars and inviting others. Friendships formed, and a sense of belonging grew strong. I watched as shy newcomers became confident storytellers, and as laughter replaced silence in rooms that had once echoed with loneliness. Hosting these events transformed my own life. I moved back into the master bedroom, reclaiming the space that had held so many memories. Decorating the house became a joyful ritual rather than a reminder of what was missing. I found purpose in creating a sanctuary where others could find comfort and connection. One afternoon, as I arranged chairs for our holiday potluck, I felt a quiet satisfaction. This was my family now, people who had felt unseen and unheard, brought together by shared pain and the desire for healing. Together, we were building a new tradition, one that honored the past but embraced the present with open arms. I thought often of Michael during these moments, wondering if he would ever join us, if he understood the journey I was on. But I also knew that my happiness no longer depended solely on his acceptance. I had found joy in unexpected places, and that was a gift I intended to cherish. Through the hearth, I discovered that family is not always defined by blood ties or holiday invitations. Sometimes, it's the quiet gatherings, the shared stories, and the simple acts of kindness that create the deepest connections. In opening my home and heart to others, I reclaimed my own sense of belonging and purpose. As the season deepened and snow began to blanket the town, our gatherings brought light and warmth into the darkest days. We sang carols, exchanged handmade gifts, and celebrated not just the holidays but the strength we found in one another. In this new chapter, I was no longer just a mother yearning for inclusion, I was a woman who had created her own community, a beacon for those seeking a place to call home. The pain of exclusion remained a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. And so, with each shared meal and every heartfelt story, the hearth grew brighter, a testament to resilience, compassion, and the enduring power of connection. The holidays arrived once more, bringing with them a swirl of memories, hopes, and quiet reflections. I sat in my living room, the soft glow of twinkling lights casting warm shadows on the walls. The house was alive in a way it hadn't been for years, not because of family gathered under one roof, but because of the community I had built and the new traditions we embraced together. I thought often about Michael and the painful truth that his holiday plans no longer included me. It was a realization that still weighed heavily on my heart, but one I had learned to accept with grace. Our relationship had shifted, shaped by time and circumstance, and while the ache of exclusion remained, it no longer defined my sense of self or worth. In the quiet moments, I reflected on my journey, from feeling invisible and forgotten to finding strength in my own voice and the bonds forged with others who understood loneliness all too well. I had discovered that family isn't always found in bloodlines or familiar faces. Sometimes it's created through shared stories, empathy, and the simple act of showing up for one another. The hearth had become more than just a gathering, it was a sanctuary where those who felt sidelined could come together, heal, and celebrate. I watched as women and men who once felt isolated found laughter again, their eyes brightening with renewed hope. Together, we crafted a new definition of family, one that embraced imperfection and change. I remembered the hesitant phone call from Michael months ago, the conversations that followed, and the fragile steps toward understanding. While we hadn't fully repaired what was broken, there was a thread of connection that still held, fragile but alive. I chose to nurture that thread without letting it tether me to pain or disappointment. One afternoon, as I prepared for another hearth gathering, a letter arrived from Michael. His handwriting was familiar, yet the words carried a weight of regret and longing. He wrote of the mistakes he'd made, the distance he'd allowed to grow, and a heartfelt desire to rebuild our relationship, not just for the holidays but for the days ahead. Reading his words stirred a mixture of emotions, hope, sadness, forgiveness. I understood that healing takes time and that love, even when tested, can find a way back if both hearts are willing. I replied with honesty and warmth, expressing my willingness to move forward with patience and openness. I made it clear that while I wished for closeness, I also valued the independence and strength I had found. Our relationship would be different now, shaped by new boundaries and mutual respect. As the snow fell softly outside, I sat on my porch, wrapped in a warm blanket, watching the world transform under winter's quiet hush. The past seasons of loneliness and exclusion felt distant, replaced by a profound sense of peace. I thought about the countless others who felt forgotten during the holidays, the silent struggles hidden behind closed doors. I wanted them to know they were not alone, that family could be redefined, that strength could be found in unexpected places. With a gentle smile, I opened my laptop and began writing a letter, not just to Michael, but to anyone who might read it. I shared my story of pain and resilience, of loss and renewal, hoping to inspire those who felt invisible to find their own voice and community. In that moment, I realized that my journey was far from over. Life would continue to bring challenges and changes, but I had discovered a resilience within me that no exclusion could diminish. I had reclaimed my place, not just in my son's life, but in the wider world, and found joy in the connections I had nurtured and the new traditions I had helped create. Justice, I learned, doesn't always arrive with fanfare or confrontation. Sometimes, it is quiet and steady, born from the courage to speak, to forgive, and to embrace the unexpected family we choose to build. And so, as the holiday lights twinkled and the hearth glowed warmly inside, I sat surrounded by stories and friends, ready to face whatever came next with an open heart and unwavering strength. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.